Buddha's birth anniversary, a day when the world comes together to honor one being. But have you truly grasped the profound significance of this sacred day? The miraculous events that unfolded on this day not only shaped history, but also transformed the way we perceive life itself. Join me as we uncover the hidden truths of Buddha's birth anniversary. It is said that on a morning unlike any other, when the forest of Lumbini lay bathed in a translucent golden mist and the petals of the Ashoka trees opened as though in reverent anticipation, something far beyond the mundane rhythm of human life unfolded. In the quietude of that dawn, when the world held its breath and even the birdsong seemed to pause in gentle wonder, Queen Maya, having journeyed from the palace to give birth in the peaceful surroundings of her maternal home, found herself overcome by an experience that transcended the boundaries of ordinary childbirth. As she stood beneath a flowering sal tree, grasping a low-hanging branch in accordance with ancient custom, the dream she had seen days earlier, of a radiant white elephant descending from the heavens and entering her womb, began to take form in living reality. There was no pain, no labor in the way the world understands it, for the child she brought into the world was not born of blood and struggle, but of purity and clarity, as if shaped from light itself. In that moment, according to the Lalitavistara Sutra, the Bodhisattva was born immaculate, like a treasure emerging from a casket untouched by the stains of the world. And as he emerged, the earth beneath him blossomed with 7 sacred lotuses, each one blooming precisely beneath his tiny feet, as he took 7 deliberate steps toward each of the cardinal directions. Then, halting, he looked calmly at the vast sky above and the earth below, and with a voice neither trembling nor boastful, but filled with ancient certainty, he declared, "Above the heavens and below the heavens, I alone am the honored one." Lalitavistara Sutra, Chapter 7. These words, often misunderstood as a proclamation of ego, were in truth a mirror held up to the sleeping consciousness of humanity. The I spoken of was not the fragile self born of desire and delusion, but the Tathagata Garbha, the Buddha nature inherent in all beings, the silent truth that each soul carries within it the potential to awaken, to pierce through the veil of suffering, and to realize its indivisible unity with all life. Thus, from the very first breath of his incarnation, Siddhartha was not a conqueror, but a reminder, not a deity demanding worship, but a reflection of what we all might become. The world, it is said, stood still. A gentle rain of heavenly flowers descended from the sky. The air shimmered with the scent of sandalwood, and the music of unseen devas filled the grove, not to celebrate the birth of a prince in worldly terms, but to mark the arrival of a light that would one day dispel the deepest darkness. Time, usually relentless in its march, seemed to pause, allowing that moment to imprint itself into the very fabric of existence, not merely as myth or memory, but as a living archetype. Yet, one might ask, was this not merely a beautiful fable, embroidered with celestial symbols and divine proclamations? And to that, the answer must lie not in blind belief, but in contemplation. For if one dares to peel back the layers of metaphor, to look not at the form, but the essence of this story, they will find not fantasy, but a profound psychological and spiritual truth. This birth tale, like many in sacred traditions, is not about a singular being elevated above all others. Rather, it is a timeless revelation of what lies dormant within us all. It is the thunderous silence before awakening, the moment just before a flame flickers to life in a darkened room. The story of Prince Siddhartha's birth is not told to glorify royalty or divine favoritism, but to awaken remembrance in the hearts of all sentient beings, that even in a world caught in the grips of impermanence, craving, and sorrow, there is a path, a possibility, a profound invitation to remember who we truly are beneath the veils of illusion. As we begin this first chapter, We do not merely recount an ancient legend inscribed in the pages of time. We step into the richly textured landscape of ancient India, a land of profound spirituality, yet also one steeped in rigid caste structures and social stratification, where birth determined destiny and liberation seemed an unattainable dream for most. The society into which Siddhartha was born was one in which the Vedic rituals held sway over the hearts of many, where ascetic sages and fire priests alike wandered the forests in search of moksha, and where the wheel of samsara turned relentlessly, binding beings to the suffering born of ignorance and attachment. Within this world, King Shuddhodana, ruler of the Shakya clan, watched the birth of his son with eyes both reverent and apprehensive. A man of power and pragmatism, the king had hoped for a strong heir, a successor who would protect the kingdom's sovereignty and continue the lineage with honor. Yet, as he gazed upon the infant prince, surrounded by signs and omens too significant to ignore, a subtle unease stirred in his heart. Could this child, so calm and luminous, truly be shaped by worldly ambition? Or had the gods, in their unfathomable wisdom, chosen a different destiny for him? Queen Maya, though filled with maternal love and quiet joy, seemed to sense the depth of the journey her son was about to undertake, even if she would not live to witness it unfold. In Buddhist tradition, she passed from this world just 7 days after giving birth, ascending to the Tushita heaven to watch over her child from the celestial realms, her role as the sacred vessel fulfilled. Her departure, though often seen as tragic, also symbolized the transient nature of all things, a theme that would echo through Siddhartha's teachings for decades to come. And then came the sage Asita, the hermit who lived on the slopes of the Himalayas, who journeyed to the palace upon reading the signs in the heavens. As he held the child and examined the marks on his feet, his brow furrowed not with doubt, but with the bittersweet recognition of prophecy fulfilled. With tears in his eyes, he spoke, "He will become either a great monarch who rules with righteousness, or a Buddha who renounces the world and liberates it." But the tears he shed were not of sorrow for the world, but for himself, for he knew he would not live long enough to hear the truth that this child would one day proclaim beneath the Bodhi tree. Thus, the earliest outlines of the Buddha-to-be began to emerge, not as a mythical hero untouched by suffering, but as a human being destined to embrace suffering fully, to walk into its depths with unwavering resolve, and to emerge not unscathed, but transformed. His path would not be one of escape, but of confrontation, of seeing reality as it is and illuminating the way for others to do the same. This is the story of Siddhartha's birth, not merely the beginning of a life, but the gentle stirring of a revolution in consciousness, the opening note in a symphony that would reverberate across millennia. And as we journey forward, may we remember that this story, though wrapped in the garments of time and tradition, is ultimately not about the past. It is about us. Now, but what is the purpose of witnessing such a birth, if not to awaken something within ourselves? The story of Siddhartha's entry into the world is more than a historical recollection. It is a symbol, a koan in narrative form, reverberating not outward toward spectacle, but inward toward stillness. For just as the baby bodhisattva took 7 steps on lotus blooms, so too must we begin to walk, gently, mindfully, into the sacred terrain of our own hearts. The external miracle has been shown. The celestial omens have been sung. Now comes the subtler, more urgent invitation, to recognize that the radiance born in Lumban did not extinguish with time, but still flickers within the hidden chamber of our being, waiting to be kindled. What begins as a cosmic birth must culminate as an inner rebirth. Between myth and mindfulness, between ancient grove and present breath, lies a living bridge, one we are all called to cross. Thus, to speak of Vesak is not to repeat a tale, it is to answer that call. It is to reawaken the seed of Bodhi that sleeps in each of us, whispering through every joy and sorrow. Awake, beloved one, your time has come. The Buddha was not only born in Lumbini, the Buddha can be born within your very heart. If the birth of Prince Siddhartha was a moment that shook not only the course of history, but also the very fabric of human consciousness, marking the first luminous crack in the great wall of ignorance that had for so long enclosed the world, then Vesak, known as the day of the Buddha's birth, is not merely an annual commemoration rooted in tradition, but a sacred return to that primordial instant of awakening. Celebrated by millions across continents, cultures, and languages, it is far more than a festival of incense and offerings. It is an invitation to pause, to listen deeply, and to allow the bell of mindfulness to resound once more in the chambers of our modern, restless hearts. For the greatest miracle Vesak offers is not found in ornate rituals, nor in splendid ceremonial platforms, nor even in the harmonious chanting that echoes through temples. Rather, it lies in the quiet reminder that the Buddha's birth was not a singular event imprisoned in the past, but a living truth that continues to unfold here and now within the heart of every being who dares to awaken. The Buddha's story, after all, is not the tale of a distant God, but the intimate journey of a human being, one who saw clearly, who felt deeply, and who walked with unwavering steps into the very core of suffering in order to uncover the path beyond it. And so, Vesak is not a tribute to a legend. It is a revolution of consciousness that can be enacted in this very moment, by you, by anyone, in the very midst of ordinary life. Among the most iconic images associated with the Buddha's birth are the 7 lotus flowers that bloomed under his feet as he took his first steps upon the earth, a vision often held in reverence, yet seldom examined for its deeper meaning. These 7 lotuses, far from being mere ornaments of mythology, are in truth powerful metaphors for the 7 gates of awakening that lie dormant within each of us. Each step the newborn Siddhartha took was not just a mark of movement, but a teaching in itself. A wordless sermon on how one might cross the threshold from delusion to insight. The first step speaks of boundless compassion, the open-hearted embrace of all beings, without distinction or preference. The second is the realization of non-discriminative wisdom, a clarity that sees through appearances to the unity beneath all forms. The third step invokes mindfulness, the sacred presence that can transform even a single breath into a doorway to peace. The fourth teaches letting go, the liberating joy of relinquishing attachment and the burdens of grasping. The fifth step is steadfast resolve, the inner strength to face temptation and suffering without retreat. The sixth embodies egoless perception, the insight that sees the self not as a fixed entity, but as an interwoven process, bound to all of life. And the seventh step is awakening itself, the realization that suffering is not an enemy to flee, but a guide, a sacred fire through which the soul is refined and made luminous. Each of these 7 lotuses, then, is not just a symbol, but a map, a guide for the soul that longs for liberation, yet does not know where to begin. They tell us that the Buddha's path was not paved with divine privileges, but with inner work, conscious effort, and the willingness to meet life as it is, in every moment. And most importantly, they whisper that this journey is not reserved for monks or mystics alone. It is for the householder in the midst of noise, the worker caught in deadlines, the parent overwhelmed with care, for anyone who decides to turn inward and begin again, gently but resolutely. If the previous chapter opened the door to a prince who chose to abandon royal comforts in search of ultimate truth, then this chapter reveals that the door he stepped through never closed behind him. It stands open still, wide and waiting, not to be admired from afar, but to be crossed by anyone with the humility to take the first step and the courage to listen to the yearning of their own heart. Vesak, in this light, is not an external celebration, but a deep remembering, a rekindling of the lamp within, which, once lit, does not merely illuminate the self, but becomes a beacon for others who still wander in darkness. And so, let this sacred day not pass you by as just another ritual observed out of habit or reverence. Let it be the spark that ignites your own transformation. Let it be the reminder that you, too, are capable of great awakening, that within your joys and wounds, your questions and quiet moments, there lies the seed of enlightenment waiting only for your care. As the Dhammapada says, awake, be the witness of your thoughts. You are what observes, not what you observe. Dhammapada, verse 37. For the Buddha is not a distant icon to be idolized, but a mirror in which your deepest potential is reflected. And this, ultimately, is the meaning of Vesak, not to worship a figure from long ago, but to recognize that within your own stillness, your own breath, your own choice to see clearly and act compassionately. A Buddha may be born again. If in the stillness of Vesak we catch a glimpse of the Buddha being born within us, as clarity, as compassion, as mindful presence, then the invitation must extend beyond that first radiant flicker. For awakening, in the deepest sense, is not a single event, but a sacred arc. It is a life lived in harmony with truth, a rhythm of inner becoming that spans birth, realization, and release. The celebration of Vesak, then, is not only about rediscovering the light within. It is about walking with it, maturing it, and ultimately dissolving into it. Just as a candle's flame casts gentle light upon a room, but then gives itself entirely to the space it brightens, so too does the awakened being move from arising to abiding to transcending. What if, as practitioners, we are not only meant to awaken in our hearts, but to awaken through our lives, shaping our birth into purpose, our struggle into understanding, and our death into freedom? This is where the Vesak story deepens its reach, drawing us into the mystical symmetry of threefold awakening. For the Buddha's journey was not only one of emergence, it was a full flowering, and we, too, are called to flower. Where would you go if you knew the exact day of your birth, your awakening, and your passing, all falling on the same day of the year? If Vesak, as we have seen, invites us to rediscover the Buddha, not only in the forests of Lumbini, but also within the fertile ground of our own hearts, then those who genuinely aspire to walk the full path of awakening cannot stop at the moment of divine birth alone. Rather, they must come to behold, with unwavering clarity and contemplative reverence, the three sacred milestones that form the arc of a fully realized life: birth, enlightenment, and parinirvana, not as separate occurrences locked in time, but as a seamless circle of transformation. These events, celebrated collectively on the single full moon day of Vesak, do not merely mark chronological moments in the Buddha's biography. They serve as radiant symbols of a journey every seeker must one day undertake. From ignorance to insight, from becoming to being, from bondage to absolute freedom. What renders this trinity even more astonishing is not the singular grandeur of any one event, but the mystical symmetry of all three unfolding, according to tradition, on the same lunar day. It is as if the universe itself had chosen this one celestial window to echo the rhythm of samsara, birth, death, and rebirth, not as a cycle of suffering, but as a sacred spiral through which consciousness evolves. In this, Vesak becomes more than a commemoration. It is a cosmic key, turning gently in the lock of time, reminding us that the beginning and the end, the journey and the destination, are never truly apart. We have often gazed in awe at the moment of the Buddha's birth, marveling at the legend of the 7 lotus steps and the proclamation of awakening. Yet it is in the forest of Uruvela, under the silent canopy of the Bodhi tree, where the heart of his journey took root. There, seated in solitude for 49 days, Prince Siddhartha did not rise as a saint granted divine favor. Instead, he endured the final crucible of inner trials. Temptations arose in the guise of desire, fear, and doubt, not from some external adversary, but from within the shadowed recesses of his own mind. It was there, amidst swirling mirages and the assault of inner demons, that the four noble truths were illuminated: that suffering exists, that it has a cause, that it can cease, and that there is a path, the noble eightfold path, that leads to that cessation. This moment, often referred to as enlightenment, was not a spectacle, but a quiet, fierce, and irreversible knowing. There was no divine hand reaching down from the heavens, no supernatural blaze, only a man, fully awake, having pierced through the illusion of separation. What he saw was not a secret belonging only to mystics, but a truth embedded in the fabric of all things, that all phenomena arise interdependently, pratya samutpada, and therefore, by understanding their causes, one can uproot the conditions that give rise to suffering. But even having attained Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, the supreme and perfect enlightenment, the Buddha did not withdraw into serene seclusion. He did not remain beneath the tree that bore witness to his liberation. Instead, with boundless compassion as his compass, he rose and walked among the people, among farmers and kings, prostitutes and priests, rich and poor, sowing seeds of awakening wherever his bare feet touched the earth. His life became a river of Dharma, flowing not to gain converts, but to offer liberation, not to build temples, but to illuminate minds. And when, after more than 40 years of tireless teaching, the time came for his departure from this physical world, the Buddha met it not with reluctance or regret, but with the same luminous equanimity he had embodied all his life. In the sacred groves of Kusinagara, between twin sal trees, he lay down on his right side, a posture of the lion's rest, and with his final breath entered Mahaparinirvana, the great cessation. But this cessation was not extinction in the way we often fear death. It was the final release from all binding conditions, the dissolution of name and form into the boundless truth that neither arises nor ceases. As he once taught, there is an unborn, unbecome, unmade, unconditioned. If there were not this unborn, unbecome, unmade, unconditioned, there would be no escape from what is born, become, made, and conditioned. Udana Osam Tochka Tre. In this, the Buddha revealed that nirvana is not a place, but a state beyond duality, not annihilation, but ultimate freedom from attachment. Thus, the trinity of Vesak, birth, enlightenment, and passing, is not merely a sacred chronology, but a template for the spiritual path itself. It mirrors the metamorphosis of a human soul, the birth of awareness, the struggle toward inner clarity, and the release into unconditional peace. Celebrating them all on a single day is not a matter of ritual convenience, but a profound spiritual statement that awakening is not linear but holistic, that beginnings and endings flow into each other, that in this very life, within this very body, liberation is not only possible, it is inevitable for those who walk the path with sincerity. Therefore, Vesak is not just a day to remember, but a day to act, to reflect, to renew, and to take one more step toward the middle way that the Buddha revealed more than 2,600 years ago. For as long as we keep walking with mindfulness, compassion, and clarity, the lamp he lit beneath the Bodhi tree will never be extinguished, and the light we carry may one day guide others, just as his light continues to guide us still. The Buddha's journey, traced through the sacred arc of birth, awakening, and final release, is not merely a chronicle of spiritual triumph. It is a template, quietly urging each of us toward wholeness. And as we bow to this triple jewel of Vesak, the next question emerges with the clarity of a bell. How does such timeless wisdom breathe in a world so bound by time? The Bodhi tree stood rooted in silence, yet its truth now moves across continents. The moon that lit Siddhartha's path to awakening still rises, now reflected not only in temple courtyards, but in the glass of skyscrapers and the glow of handheld screens. And perhaps that is the deeper miracle, that amidst the noise of modern life, the Dharma has not grown dim. It has become the very stillness through which we hear ourselves again. For Vesak is not only the memory of what was, it is the seed of what still can be. As the Buddha once rose from meditation and walked into the world, so too must we carry the fragrance of awakening into the streets, the schools, the offices, and online spaces of our age. The question is no longer, can the Dharma survive the world? But rather, can the world survive without it? From lanterns rising into the night skies of Thailand to solemn processions through the candlelit streets of Sri Lanka, Vesak has moved beyond the boundaries of religion to become a living symbol of global peace. Having reflected upon the sacred trinity of the Buddha's life, his birth, enlightenment, and final liberation, one cannot help but ask, how does this timeless wisdom, born from forests and silence, find its way into the hearts of modern people? Those caught in the ever-quickening pulse of cities, surrounded by neon lights, tethered to technology, and often wandering in the subtle disquiet of spiritual doubt? The answer, radiant in its quiet power, may be found in Vesak, the full moon day in the month of Vesaka, a day that has grown far beyond its origin as a religious observance to become a global message of compassion, inner awakening, and universal peace. Since 1999, the United Nations has recognized Vesak as an official international day of celebration, acknowledging not merely the historical significance of the Buddha's life, but more importantly, the ethical and spiritual values his life represents. Values that transcend all borders, belief systems, and political affiliations. And so Vesak, which once echoed through temple bells in small eastern villages, now resounds across continents, observed by millions of people in dozens of countries, each celebration infused with its own culture, yet united by a shared reverence for one figure. The Buddha, not as a deity to be worshipped, but as the embodiment of mindfulness, clarity, and unconditional love that the modern world so desperately needs. One may ask, and rightly so, how did a festival born from a single tradition in a specific corner of Asia find resonance in the hearts of a global community? The answer lies not in spectacle or dogma, but in the gentle, insistent power of example. Vesak holds no sword and claims no throne. It does not seek conversion nor demand allegiance. Its strength lies in its stillness, its sincerity, and its reminder that transformation begins not with nations, but with the individual, with you. In Thailand, thousands gather at riverbanks and temples to release lotus-shaped lanterns into the night sky and onto calm waters, each light a whispered prayer for peace. In Sri Lanka, streets are bathed in candlelight as people keep vigil through the night, their hearts quietly echoing the Dharma. In Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia, homes are adorned with simplicity and grace, families reunite, and even the busiest souls pause to reconnect with the silence within. In Korea and Japan, elaborate rituals and processions wind through cities, but always beneath them pulses the same gentle truth, that Vesak is a return to oneself and to a world in harmony. And though customs vary and languages differ, the essence of Vesak remains unshaken. It is a day that celebrates not mythology, but the possibility of living a conscious life, a life of nonviolence, of compassion without borders, of mindfulness in every breath. It is a time when humanity is gently invited to lay down its weapons, not only of war, but also of pride, prejudice, and fear, and to listen once more to the quiet truth that the world is changed not through power or wealth, but through the still, determined transformation of the heart. There is a profound beauty in the fact that a day which honors the liberation of a single being has become a bridge across nations, cultures, and even faiths. Vesak now carries in its luminous simplicity a vision of unity, a shared human aspiration for peace, dignity, and compassion, reminding us that no matter how fragmented the world may seem, there is still a space in which we can meet, not as adversaries, but as fellow seekers. It is a day when Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, and those of no religion at all may come together not in debate, but in recognition of the sacredness of life itself. And so, Vesak is not only a day of remembrance, nor merely a ritual occasion for monastics or temple-goers. It is an opportunity, a gentle pause in the year's relentless motion, for all of humanity to step outside the storm of distraction and conflict, and to kindle together a single light. The light of wisdom, which, when tended with care, has the power to dispel ignorance, not with force, but with understanding. In a time when wars can begin with a post, when digital words can wound deeper than weapons, when humanity stands at the edge of ecological, spiritual, and existential crises, Vesak offers perhaps the most powerful and compassionate response imaginable, a call not to arms, but to awakening. It calls us to remember that we are not powerless, that in choosing to live mindfully, speak truthfully, act kindly, and walk gently, we become part of the solution the world has been waiting for. Thus, Vesak, soft, luminous, and unassuming, may very well be the most radical answer to the chaos of our times, not because it demands change from others, but because it begins with the one place we truly have the power to transform, ourselves. As Vesak casts its luminous net across continents, linking temples in Tokyo with chants in Nairobi, and sky lanterns in Bangkok with silent prayers in New York, we begin to see that its true strength does not lie in its scale, but in its capacity to enter the local, the particular, the deeply personal. For if Vesak as a global observance unites humanity through shared longing, then Vesak in each land, each culture, becomes the mirror through which the universal Dharma reflects its local face. In this way, we arrive in Vietnam, not as tourists of tradition, but as humble witnesses to a spiritual expression both ancient and alive. Here, beneath tamarind trees and tiled roofs, amidst incense smoke and lullabies, Vesak does not shout, it whispers. And in that whisper is a wisdom cultivated over centuries, not through conquest, but through quiet endurance. For the question is no longer, how does the world celebrate Vesak? But how does Vesak shape the world that celebrates it? And in Vietnam, the answer rises gently from bowls of rice, weathered prayer beads, and the wordless grace of lives lived close to the earth. The sound of temple bells echoes through city streets. Floral floats shimmer in procession, and the hearts of millions grow still. This is not merely a festival. It is the moment a nation gathers beneath the light of the sacred. If Vesak, as celebrated across the globe, is a luminous message of peace spoken in the silent language of mindfulness and compassion, then Vesak in Vietnam reveals another equally profound dimension, one where spirituality becomes indistinguishable from daily life and where faith, far from being abstract, is woven into the very fabric of how people speak, relate, eat, and remember. In this land where Buddhism has not only shaped temples but has quietly entered the soul of the people, Vesak is not a distant observance, but a living presence, an annual heart-opening that combines solemnity with intimacy, the sacred with the familiar, and devotion with deep cultural identity, Step onto any Vietnamese street during the full moon of the 4th lunar month, and you will witness a scene at once vibrant and serene. Radiant flower-adorned floats weaving through alleyways and avenues, flags of 5 colors fluttering gently from balconies and gates. Children clasping their palms with a reverence beyond their years, and elders bowing their silver-haired heads in silent prayer. It is as if, in those few days, the entire nation becomes a single breathing body of devotion, each heartbeat synchronized with a shared rhythm of remembrance and renewal, a sacred communion beyond words, formed simply by being fully present. From the mystical pagodas of the north to the austere temples of central Vietnam and the hospitable Buddhist centers of the south, ceremonial stages rise not to dazzle, but to remind, to reflect the image of the infant Buddha standing upon a lotus pedestal, hands pointing to heaven and earth, embodying the vow to awaken for the liberation of all beings. Central among the rituals is the bathing of the Buddha, a tradition with ancient Indian roots, yet one that has taken deep root in Vietnamese soil, transforming over centuries into a deeply personal and moving practice. In these ceremonies, people queue in quiet reverence, ladling water gently over a small golden statue, not to cleanse it, but to cleanse themselves. Each drop is a symbolic washing away of anger, sorrow, restlessness, and ignorance, the invisible dust that settles on the heart over the course of life. Here, to bathe the Buddha is to bathe one's own mind. It is a gentle, wordless vow whispered through gesture. May I return to clarity. May I become pure again. May I remember who I truly am. And Vesak in Vietnam does not stop at ritual. It extends far beyond the temple gates, reaching into neighborhoods, fields, marketplaces, and hearts. Throughout the country, pagodas organize evenings of chanting, meditation, Dharma talks, acts of charity, and ceremonial animal release, not to impress or convert, but to plant the quiet seed of mindful living. These events are not staged performances, but living expressions of the Eightfold Path in action, reminding people that even the simplest gesture, a whispered prayer for one's parents, the offering of food to someone hungry, or a moment of stillness in the chaos, can be a step toward awakening. Thus, in Vietnam, Vesak becomes not a spectacle, but a lived symbol of how the spiritual path and everyday life are not two. Here, the Dharma is not confined to sacred texts, but breathes through songs sung to lull children to sleep, in incense offered at the ancestral altar, and in the resilience of a people who have endured much, and yet continue to meet the world with quiet dignity and open-hearted generosity. If the previous chapter portrayed a global Vesak, uniting nations through the shared longing for wisdom and peace, then here in Vietnam, we witness that light nourished by the humble hands of ordinary people, by farmers and students, artisans and monks, who carry the tradition not as doctrine, but as an inheritance of the heart. In this land shaped by centuries of struggle and renewal, the light of Vesak is neither fragile nor fading. It is kept alive through simplicity, sincerity, and the unmistakable Vietnamese spirit of devotion that has never sought attention, only truth. For in Vietnam, the Buddha is not a distant figure gazing down from the heavens. He is present in the bowl of rice offered to one's mother, in the silent tear shed beside a candlelit shrine, in the fragrant incense rising with the morning sun, and in the quiet peace one finds between breaths in the middle of a crowded street. In a world often consumed by speed and spectacle, Vesak in Vietnam stands as a gentle reminder that awakening need not be dramatic, and faith need not be loud. That the sacred can live in the simplest of acts, and that a single moment of stillness, lived with depth and presence, can be as vast as the Dharma itself. In the lantern-lit streets of Vietnam, we saw how Vesak becomes a communal breath, a shared rhythm of reverence pulsing through villages and cities alike. But even as the final incense curls skyward and the flower-laden floats drift into memory, a deeper invitation gently emerges, not to let go, but to carry forward. For what use is the most beautiful ritual if it leaves no trace in the days that follow? What worth has devotion if it does not soften the voice with which we speak, or tenderize the heart with which we respond to life? The Dharma is not found only in chanting halls or sacred texts. It must unfold in kitchens, in traffic jams, in the quiet ache of ordinary mornings. Thus, the question arises not, how do we celebrate Vesak, but how do we continue Vesak, not just on full moons beneath temple spires, but in every breath that longs to be present. This is the final step, where Vesak ceases to be a ceremony and becomes a way of being. You don't need to retreat into a forest, abandon your career, or become a monk. If each day you light a small lamp of mindfulness in your heart, then you are already living the true spirit of Vesak. When the candles of the lantern ceremony flicker and fade into the embrace of the night, when the echo of temple bells dissolves into the stillness of a city slowly waking, a quiet question remains. What is left for us to carry home? After the solemn rituals have ended and the emotions of Vesak Day begin to settle, what truly endures? What can we continue to nurture, not just in memory, but in the living current of our everyday lives? For if the vibrant celebrations and sacred imagery remain but fleeting impressions, while the mind continues to drift in the tides of gain and loss, joy and sorrow, then Vesak, no matter how revered, becomes only a passing shadow at the threshold of the heart. That is why the most profound gift of Vesak lies not in the homage to a Buddha who lived 26 centuries ago, but in the gentle, urgent invitation that his life extended, to allow a Buddha to be born within ourselves, not for a single day, but with every breath, every choice, every moment. In this age, an era of unrelenting speed, where digital noise often drowns out the inner voice, and where material success is too easily mistaken for true fulfillment, the core values of Vesak become not only relevant, but essential. Compassion, mindfulness, and liberation are not lofty ideals preserved in Scripture, but living tools for human survival and spiritual flourishing. And to practice them does not mean to withdraw from the world or renounce its responsibilities. On the contrary, to live the spirit of Vesak today is to be fully present within the world, yet untouched by its confusion. It may begin with something so simple as a pause, a gentle stopping of the internal momentum, to notice one's thoughts with care. It may be found in eating a meal with gratitude, in choosing kind words over reactive ones, or in sharing even a small gift with sincerity. It may be the quiet decision not to check your phone first thing in the morning, but instead to sit, if only for a minute, in silence, breathing consciously, feeling yourself alive, not as a task to complete, but as a sacred homecoming. On Vesak Day, if you have chanted a short sutra, offered a vegetarian meal in mindful reverence, or bowed before a Buddha statue with humility, not to ask for miracles, but to deepen your understanding, then already you have planted a seed of awakening. But if, in the days that follow, you continue to guard that single breath of awareness, returning to it again and again as life flows on, then you are no longer merely commemorating the Buddha's birth. You are nourishing a Buddha within yourself, not in form, but in spirit. A Buddha not marked by robes or rituals, but by the quality of your being, by how deeply you listen, how gently you walk, how truthfully you speak, and how fully you embrace the humanity of those around you. Thus, the spirit of Vesak does not conclude with the final chime of a temple bell, nor is it confined to flower-laden altars or ceremonial processions. It continues, quietly but persistently, in the choices we make each day. in the middle of crowded marketplaces, or within the quiet of a modest room amidst deadlines and distractions, or in rare moments of nighttime stillness. Whenever you choose awareness over habit, empathy over anger, patience over judgment, you are not only honoring Vesak, you are living it. For in the end, to live mindfully in an unmindful world is a radical act of love. To choose compassion where resentment is easy is a gesture of great courage. And to return to yourself again and again, with humility and sincerity, is to walk the very same path that Siddhartha once walked beneath the Bodhi tree. And so, even when the lights have dimmed and the celebration has passed, may your life remain a luminous offering, a quiet revolution, a prayer without words. In a world that forgets itself far too often, may you remember who you are, and in doing so, become the light that guides others home. If this video brought peace to your heart, share it with someone who may be walking in the dark. One candle lights another.